Let's start with Ahmed, if I can. Ahmed, uh, as far as you know, your role is concerned, can you provide a brief history of where football is today in Saudi from a developmental standpoint, and what role is the federation in the grand scheme of things, being the football ecosystem?
Well, I'm going to take you back in history a little bit. Football basically started in Saudi. Football participation started basically in the early 1920s here in Saudi. We've seen the first football clubs being established years after that, a few years in the mid-1920s. And fast forward to 1956, the Saudi Arabian Football Federation was established, becoming a member of FIFA, and then 6 years after that, becoming an AFC member as well. So the role of the Saudi Arabian Football Federation is basically the governing body and the organizing body of football in the kingdom. Some of our roles and responsibilities are around organizing competitions, national teams, developing talent and player pathway, developing women's football, as well as strengthening our relations internationally and hosting tournaments. And it's also more than that. But going back on the history side of football development, and 50 years ago, we've seen at that time we didn't have a lot of venues to play football, especially at the elite level. So that's where football investment started in the kingdom 50 years ago. And we've seen the relationship between investment and football and this game and result and success in it. Where after, in the 80s and the 90s, we've seen how our national teams become successful, winning the Asian Cup 3 times, 1984, 1988, and 1996, reaching the final of the Asian Cup in 1992 and 2000. Also performing well in the World Cup in 1994, reaching the round of 16. Our ranking, has gone up to number 27 in the world ranking, which is unbelievable. And this is, it shows how investment in football is important, and it reflects on the performances on the field. After that, in the beginning of the millennium, in the 2000s, investment slowed, and performances also slowed down, where we found that our ranking in the football and the FIFA ranking basically went down by 44 places. But fast forward to 2016, Vision 2030 was launched, and there is a big focus on sports, but in football development in particular. And this is where we think that current investment is being done, where we can see basically the influence of football here in Saudi, and it will lift people, lift our ambition, and this is really important for SAF and also for the football ecosystem here in Saudi.
If I can just follow up on that, do you sense a new wave of the way we performed back in '94? Maybe the pinnacle of Saudi football. Do you sense that we are, at the beginning of a drive towards those days?
Definitely, 100%. And I can maybe in the next questions, I'm going to follow up on that. I'm going to give you some examples of what we're doing exactly at SAF that will, inshallah, hopefully take us to that route.
Great, thank you. Badr, in the past, the ambitions at the Federation describes that, the way you describe it is that you've been working very closely and connected to the resources provided by the government through the ministry. Can you explain the approach now towards growth and the role that the private sector, which is something that was recently put together, is playing in encouraging the game on a domestic level?
So thank you for having me here, and thanks everyone for attending and supporting. We've been working closely with clubs. As Ahmed have mentioned, there is a huge progression that is happening and taking place it's a whole transformation that's happening towards the kingdom, and as well as to the sport sector generally in the kingdom, and follows also as well the clubs as an important pillar in the sports ecosystem. Clubs in the kingdom, we consider them incubators for the community, youth, people. When you are young, if you want to practice any sport you have in mind, the first place you would go to is sports clubs. It started as neighborhood community centers to practice sports, and developed and grows to be professional clubs later on. Now, we are in a very unique position when it comes to sport clubs in the kingdom. All clubs used to be managed by public sector. Private sector engagement in managing, developing those clubs was limited to, let's say, sponsoring, funding those clubs, but not more than that when it comes to the ecosystem contribution. Nowadays, we've noticed in the past year a transformation of few clubs among many, from the public sector to the private sector. And we've also noticed the impact of that movement. Why are we doing this? Why have we moved from public-owned clubs to private-owned clubs after looking and benchmarking to all the world? Is one, if we want to be among the top leagues, which is an objective that we have, we cannot do this without partnering with our partners from the private sector. Imagine just owning 170 clubs, and you want to elevate all of those clubs at the same pace, at the same level, at the same time. It's an impossible mission. So the best way to do so, to achieve your goals, is by engaging those private sector in filling this gap, and it's a win-win situation for both parties. You have more efficient, more competitive, more professional clubs that plays in your league, and they invest in a sector that was, let's call it, was locked previously, and today it's an unlocked asset for the private sector to invest in, basically.
Just over a year ago, a handful of clubs were tendered.
Yeah.
What kind of impact have you seen from that so far?
We've seen 3 out of, let's speak, first of all, there are 4 clubs that have been transferred or acquired by PIF, each in a separate company. And then another 4 have been transferred or acquired by 4 different development institutions. 3 out of those 4 have been promoted to a higher division. We've seen huge investment by the owners in their clubs. We've seen more commercialization, more professionalism, and those are off-pitch, which contributed on the on-pitch performance of those clubs.
So clearly a success.
It's a clear success. It's even when you look at Al Qadsiya's example, fan engagement. You have usually some fans, if your club is not developing, if your club is not, let's say, changing or doing any development, we call them, let's say, calm fans. They don't attend games, etc. Once we did this transformation, the engagement the club did with the community, with their fans, it increased the attendees amount of number in their matches. So again, it's a win-win. Fans have got their passion back to attend those games post-privatization, and the club have increased the number of attendees, which makes them sell more tickets, more merchandise, etc.
Yeah, that's a great example, because we're just before halfway through the league, I would say, and Qadsiya is sitting at 4th place, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And that's
and
proof.
They were promoted last year, so.
And they're recently promoted.
Yellow, yeah.
It's a great example. Ahmed, on the subject of development that Badr just touched on, can you talk to us about some programs that you have developed that touch on the developmental side of things?
Yeah, well, basically we had a 5-year strategy launched in 2021 up until 2025. And basically we have different initiatives and KPIs. We've already completed probably 85% of that before the end of 2025. Now, with the current ambition, hosting, inshallah, the 2027 Asian Cup, and with our bid for the 2034 World Cup, we have to refresh the strategy, have it become long-term, and basically our focus is going to be more on becoming competitive hosts. And this is our target, where we can focus on player pathway and scouting, working on our infrastructure, and with the bid, with the 2034 bid, part of that is working on infrastructure. It's not only stadiums, but also training centers. And these training centers are going to have a lot of influence on how we're going to develop players here in Saudi. So this is the legacy of the 2034 bid file, where it will have a lasting impact on football here in the kingdom.
So if I'm not mistaken, you're probably looking at the 12 to 15-year-olds today who will be 22, 25 come 2034.
Exactly, yes.
As potential, the representatives of that World Cup.
Yes, yes. I mean, we have, so we used to have about 5 national teams. We had the first national team, we have the under 23, the under 21, the 19, and I think 17. We increased that into 10 national teams. So about every year, the under 14, under 15, under 16, under 17, under 18, under 19. So we increased the number of national teams for us to have that, pathway into the first national team. And hopefully that national team that will reach the 2030, 2034 World Cup are going to become competitive hosts.
Amazing. That's great to hear. Doubling the number of national teams. Badr, a lot has been made of the investments into star signings. There's global headlines, obviously, every time someone comes to Saudi that is of a name. And the talent on the pitch now in Saudi with the Pro League. Would it be fair to say that as much has gone into developing players on the pitch as off the pitch?
Yeah, so I believe so. And for anyone who have seen the Saudi Pro League TV series that have been produced and launched on Netflix, you would hear a lot of coaches, locally or internationally, and international players as well as locals, mentioning how they could learn from each other. So we could see the contribution that international athletes and superstars and players have contributed to their team members. I think the impact is clear, as well as if you see some local players who play internationally and then they come back, the performance, the tactic, whatever they learn from engaging with different mindset, with different schools of playing, would have its own impact. So it has been mentioned. They feel it, and we see it on the match days.
If we can take a step back, because you touched on privatization, I know the space is hot. I heard rumors of interest even from the international world of investors who want some skin in the game in the Saudi League, which is a great testament to what you're doing. But can you tell us, what does the future hold for the league in terms of investments and privatization?
Yeah. So maybe I've mentioned this before. We sit at a very unique position. No one else in the world have been in that situation where you have that many of clubs that you want to privatize. And then we started with, let's say, few steps that have been done so far. We've announced 14 afterwards. We've tendered 6 so far. We've received a good amount of interest that we believe. Again, when we look at clubs privatization, it's not only football. Football presents the majority of, let's say, the sport clubs when it comes to, let's say, fans, when it comes to revenue generating, when it comes to expense or cost center in the club. It's mostly related to football. That's why we always link it to football, but it's a multi-sports clubs. And we've seen that interest mainly because people do believe in what's happening. Government have been investing before. Government will continue investing in the sports sector because they believe in the importance and the essence of this sector. But the only one thing that have been changed is that we believe in the contribution of the private sector to achieve these goals. They will play a very important role to achieve the KPIs that would benefit both sides, private and public sector. We are not after, let's say, mainly the revenues that will be generated by selling those clubs, but we are after the development. And that's why when we qualify bidders and we look into it, we look at the technical part more than any other part else. So what kind of value added they can bring to those clubs, the know-how they will bring. We want to see those clubs sustainable and to be continuously developing in a single sport or in many sports as well.
Obviously, both of you gentlemen, your work is cut out for you. You know, big challenges ahead in both your verticals. If I was to ask you, Ahmed, what is the biggest challenge you see ahead of you as we gear up to the Asian Cup in 27 and onwards? What would you say your biggest challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is, meeting your own, it lies in meeting your own ambition. I think this is difficult. You have high ambitions and this country is moving at a fast scale, at a fast speed, and you need to meet that. We're going to host, inshallah, the Asian Cup very soon, hopefully the World Cup in 2034 and other competitions. And we need to become, competitive hosts. And when that happens, the fans in the host country carry. You will feel the energy in the host. When the fans of this country are actually feeling, the winning and progressing through the tournament, the atmosphere is different, and the success of that tournament, is going to be maximized when that happens. So I think this is the most important thing: is meeting our own ambition.
My Qatari friends tell me that after Saudi exited the World Cup, it was a much different town without the Saudi fans. So definitely local participation is huge. So round of 16 and beyond clearly is the ambition, yeah?
Exactly.
Inshallah. I'll close with you on the same question. What is, as far as you're concerned, maybe the biggest challenge out there for you?
I think it's time. The sector we are working in and we are close to has some emotionality when it comes to it. We expect everything to happen quickly, especially when we see these amount of investment. So we need to be a bit patient to see those results appear. We are working on, and what's also unique about it, we are working on different streams. We are privatizing clubs. We are building infrastructure. We are hosting Asian Football Cup. We are hosting World Football. We are developing a strong national team. Working on all those streams is challenging, and I think it takes time, but we are very committed, we are persistent, and we are agile. We are fixing while working and learning while working, and I think we will reach there.
Inshallah, we will.
Inshallah.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ahmed Al Jasir and Badr Al Jirasi.
Thank you.